Hi, I'm Tara, and welcome to Let's Do Books. I am so excited because this week I'm joined by author Lola Keeley. She has 3 books out with Ilva Publishing. Her debut novel, The Music in the Mirror, knocked my freaking socks off, and the latest is called Slammed, and it's out everywhere. Welcome, Lola.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So, you are an author, but we're actually here to talk about your journey as a reader. So, how did you first discover lesbian fiction? How did that journey go for you?
It was a kind of a roundabout one for me. I kept sort of dipping my toes into the water and then wandering off and getting distracted by something else. So I've always been like a voracious reader. There's just, growing up, there were never enough books. I was always maxed out at the library and stuff. And then I happened to marry someone who is like that, but 10 times worse. So we have a house full of books. But she was also, for a couple of years, the books editor for Diva magazine, which is our UK kind of curve, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we started being kind of inundated with like every genre of queer fiction. And that was when I went from like casual, oh cool, this has lesbians in it, but I was going to read it anyway, to, oh my God, we have like our own thing. And at the same time, that kind of coincided with my own sort of sideways move from fan fiction into like the actual publishing side of things. So it was like a big rainbow moment of everything sort of converging on go and do gay stuff. And I said, okay.
Were there any early books that really stood out for you?
There were. I started, my personal sort of one-on-one introduction was through Lee Winter, who actually ended up being my editor on a couple of books. She had kind of, when someone hits you up and says, hey, do you want to publish books like I have? Then you start with them, really.
Mm-hmm.
So The Brutal Truth, which is a great introduction for everyone, I think. I recommend that to so many people because even if you don't know if it's your genre, then, you'll like that book regardless. It is a genuinely good read. So I did that, and then I just sort of went on a spree, really. Like someone who had to buy a certain amount of books in a certain amount of time. I went through Jay and Rachel Spangler and just a lot of really cool names. And yes, and there's still a ton to read. My to-read pile is out of control. I started late, but I'm making up for it now.
No judging. My to-be-read list on my Kindle, I think, is around 600.
Ooh, I thought I was bad at they're all there and waiting, and they will all get their turn. But reading for fun at the moment is a bit of a luxury, so I'm trying to make more time for it.
So before you found LesFic, you mentioned that you'd kind of come across some here and there. What was the first one that you actually stumbled on? Do you remember?
I don't think I actually got a chance to read it, but I think one of Jay's earlier ones, the Backwards to Oregon, I think that kind of passed through my wife's to read pile, and she was like, oh, you'll like this. And as happens with like 50% of the ones that I like, they end up getting borrowed by someone or, go back to a shelf where I can't see them every day anymore, and then I don't get around to it. But I think that when Backwards to Oregon was just out, I think that was probably the first conscious. Cool. This is specifically like LesFic or that kind of genre. I was like, oh, hello. Put a pin in it mentally and didn't get back to it for a couple of years. So,
did you read it eventually?
I did, and it's very good. Although the only thing is, it always makes me want to play that Oregon Trail game that we used to play in school. You can now play it online as a simulator, and it's just, it's always at the back of my head, go and play the game, don't you, just no. But obviously it's a big sweeping love story, and it's much more involved and everything like that, but it just always puts that little Oregon nugget into my head, so I can't be trusted.
That's amazing. So what inspired you to start writing?
Oh, there's a good question. I guess the frustration, really. My roots, as everyone probably knows if they've heard anything about me, is that I started in fanfic, and the biggest common thread there is not seeing your own stories represented and being able to relate to the characters because you see them as queer, or you think their behavior totally means they're in love with that other woman. And then it gets pulled out from under you and you're like, but like that's less convincing. I don't believe this woman is suddenly in love with this bland ass guy who just appeared 2 episodes ago. No.
Once upon a time.
yeah. I was telling this one Queen people, we've all got that haunted look in our eyes. They really just took a great thing and just demolished it, unfortunately. But yeah, and it was partly that, and also it gave me a safe space really to try and write like fanfic. I think doesn't get enough credit for how supportive the fandom is, because they want more of what you want. They want to see themselves in the stories, and even if you're not great, even if you're not like the best fic writer in the world, the fact that you're trying and you're putting something out there, and you get better the more you do. It's a really supportive, and I learned a lot of the stuff I'm still using to write books now. Grammar, or like avoid this trope, or people hate this. That's all been informed by a really active fanfic audience. So yeah, that's what really made the difference between writing privately in a book or a journal and wanting to write things that people could actually see. That made the difference for me.
Mm-hmm. Do you still write fanfic at all?
I do. I'm actually behind on something for Supercat Week, which I might post tonight if I get some time.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's one of those things. The characters, once they've taken root, you don't want to entirely leave them. So it's a good exercise. It's a fun break from deadlines and serious stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always, again, it's lovely validation and support to post something and people get hyped and they're like, hey, you're back. I didn't abandon you, I promise. So
do you still read much of it?
That's one thing that has definitely suffered the past year or two. There's a couple, if I remember to click subscribe, that's the killer thing on AO3. I have to remember to do it. There's a couple I've read, mostly just Supercat at the moment, in the past year or so, but not anything like the rate. I used to be reading fic like every day on my lunch break and stuff like that. But I don't get to have that much fun anymore. Too much to do. But yeah, there's still some great fic. I mean, I mentioned Supercat is like my main fandom, and despite the fact Cat hasn't been on the show for about 4 years, that's still going strong, which is pretty wild.
Can you explain to people who don't know what Supercat is?
Oh yeah, sorry. Supergirl, which is now on the CW, has Kara, who's your main Supergirl person, and then Cat Grant, who used to be her boss in season 1. And it's got the age gap thing, it's got the rich girl, poor girl thing. Power dynamics are just off the chart. So you've got superhero, you've got billionaire CEO. Yeah, it's very compelling for obvious reasons. Mm-hmm. So, and the fact the fandom is still active. It's small, but it's active, and there's got some fantastic writers. So we have some fun times.
Yeah, I get it. I still love reading Devil Wears Prada fanfic for pretty much all the same reasons that you just described, and it's like I'm shocked at how active it still is, given that the movie came out 12 or 13 years ago,
and the fact that it is just one movie, like that's the whole canon, and it's not a particularly developed world. I wouldn't say. Like what the fandom has built out of it is just Morandi was really my transition from generic fandom, I guess you would say, to like fem/fandom in particular. And Morandi was just like, you just dive in, and so many of those long fics are like novel quality, and some of them are going to be novels or already are novels. And yeah, it was just like, it was like discovering treasure or something. It was just like, this already exists.
Mm-hmm.
And then yeah, I kind of watched Supergirl thinking, oh look, this might be like Morandi but for television, and then it just developed into its own thing. So it was like double win.
What was it like for you making the leap from fanfic to writing original fiction?
It was a little surprising. I think like maybe some people would be like actively pursuing it, and that's great. Like, have that hustle. I am perpetually a bit distracted and very spread across 4 different projects at any given time. So I wasn't really. I kind of thought about it in the back of my mind, like a lot of us do. Like if you sit and write 100,000 word fanfic, you don't have commitment issues. Like you're thinking maybe something one day. It's nice to prove to yourself you can even do that. But yeah, it was Lee, as I mentioned before, had been talking with Astrid, who's our CEO at Ilva, and they'd just been, I guess, as they do, keeping track of what's happening in fandom and who's writing what. And I had just dived into this epic ballet story, this alternative universe, which had been a group of fic writers sitting in a chat, and we'd been sitting talking, what's the one thing you would write if you just had like unlimited time and nobody would distract you? And I was like, I want to write this story, and you know, it totally fits their personalities, it totally fits their worlds. And it was a few, you know, headcanons in a Slack chat, and then it got out of control. So as I was about halfway through posting that, it was already kind of mostly written out, but I was just, you know, refining as I went. That's when Lee slid into my DMs, as the kids say. I was also like, that sounds so inappropriate. It was a very business-like transaction, but yeah, and just said, hey, would you have any interest? And I thought, well, you know, let's find out how that works. It might not be for me, but yeah, it was just all very open and upfront, and here's how we make books. And I thought, I want to do this, and they were crazy enough to take me. So the music in the mirror kind of came out of that, and yeah, if that had been all that came out of it, that would have been great. I would have been very happy. But it's cool that it's turned into something a bit more as well.
I love that book so much.
Oh, I'm so glad that people do. It really was, you know, when people say a labor of love, I'm like, yeah, blood, sweat, tears, the whole kit and caboodle went into that process. It's so nice to be able to, I think my favourite kind of comment I've had about it is the I'm not into ballet, but.
I think I said that in my review.
Yeah, it's a common thread, like maybe half and half, I think. A lot of people who were like, oh, I want to read about ballerinas because that's their thing. And a lot of people who were like, I don't know, it might be boring, or I might not get it. And, you know, I worked in the theatre for a long time. I love the arts. I am a crazy go nuts person for everyone should have access to whatever art makes them happy. And the fact that I could just bring one thing that I enjoy and like share it with a bunch of people, but also make it super queer and a little bit hot. And yeah, it was like such a fulfilling thing to work on. So I'm just glad that it's out there and that people are having pretty good reactions to it still, even after a year or so.
I haven't read Slammed yet, but
that's okay. It's just out.
Yeah, we're recording this in October, and it's going to go out early in the new year. So I'm going to try and have it read by then for sure.
You can always stick a little bit in it, you know, it's all good. That's one thing that surprised me about publishing, because fanfic was very much people read it as it's posted, and there's a huge kind of crush to get to it, and then it goes really quiet for a while, and then someone will maybe pop up a year later with a comment and be like, oh, hey. But books are really, they just keep going. People will get to it when they get to it, and you know, pre-orders and first week sales and all that, that's all very cool in a like Amazon hype kind of way, but it's so nice to know that like it's like a permanent thing almost. It's someone up 5 years later or 2 months later and just be like, okay, this is my time with this book now, and they enjoy it or don't enjoy it just as much as they were going to any other time. So
I feel like I do that all the time. I finally read Anne Bannon's books recently, which are like lesbian pulps for the 1950s and 60s, and I'm like, has anyone heard of Anne Bannon? You need to read these books. And it's like, okay, like they're 60 years old, but calm down, Tara. So yeah, like anybody can come to your stuff at any time and want to tell all the people that they know who also may not have had a chance to read them yet.
They might be encountering something in a different context to when it first came out. So, you know, a lot of stuff has been happening everywhere all the time. And if people find that like escapism in a book, you know, when everything else is chaotic, I'm just like, fantastic. You know, I'm so glad that you got, even if it was like a couple of days of peace and quiet, I'm so glad you got that.
Well, I think your books are really good for that because they're so immersive. So it is nice that you can just like sink in and say like the world might be garbage, but you know, my time right now is a break from that, and I think that's really important right now. I think people really need that.
I think so, yeah.
Thank you for being an awesome listener and supporting Tilt, the channel that brings you all the podcasts you want to hear. You're listening to Tilt. Find more podcasts on thelesbiantalkshow.com.
So, what are you reading these days?
Oh gosh, what am I reading? I've just been reading a non-fiction book actually, because the nerd is strong with this one always, and it's called Because Internet, and it's all about how we've evolved as like a society since we all got online and when we got online. So that's been really interesting in terms of like looking at how we communicate with each other on email, on chat, on Twitter, and then putting that into the context of like how you then interact with readers, because you can really I wouldn't have dreamed growing up of like speaking to the author of my books that I was reading. Like that didn't seem like an option. I know you could like write to the publisher and stuff, but it wasn't exactly obvious. It wasn't encouraged. And now people can be like, I have some like readers who will sort of do a live blog or a live tweet as they read.
Yeah.
And that is just like the coolest thing. It is just so like it's like you're getting to watch someone experience it, and they can ask you questions as well. So that's always good if you're doing something that's like quite a new world to people, or something that's a bit complicated. But I've been reading that, and I've just queued up Karen Frost's new book, which is I don't read a lot of fantasy, but it's been really highly wrecked to me, and it's got daughter in the title. I'm terrible at titles.
Oh,
so.
That has a great cover to it. I forget what it's called too, but that's also from Ilva, right?
Yeah, it is indeed. Passions Between Women is also in there apparently. I'm Donahue. I'm just checking my Kindle app as I'm like, you will never remember the title of anything. You know this about yourself. Just finished The X Ingredient, which I was saving up like it was a Christmas present. So
okay. For people who are listening who may not know this, The X Ingredient started out as a fan fiction from Telenu, which is incredible. And now it's come out as an original fiction. Very, very different. She's totally rewritten it. There are a few elements.
It really has, yeah.
Did you read both?
I did. I had The X Ingredient bookmarked for about, I don't even know how many years, but it was always there, because it was always when people said, hey, I've never read this fandom, what should I read?
Oh, so you send them into the shallow end of the pool then.
Yeah, I'd be like, okay, so do you want, you would send everyone to Truth and Measure, because
of course
it's an epic. But obviously there's that withdrawal everyone hits right after they've read that, when they're like, I have nothing else to read. And so you have to have a stockpile ready. A lot of people who are like, oh, I don't really know if I see that as a pairing. I don't really know if that's like a sexy thing, or like, a mentorship thing. And I'd be like, yeah, totally. Very ambiguous. And then you would send them The X Ingredient, and you would just get back, yeah, it's a sex thing. And you'd be like, cool.
Yeah.
So yeah. It is. I think it's like, it sort of was famous for being like hot in fandom circles, and obviously it was written in a very different time, like sort of culturally and socially and stuff, which it sounds like it's 50 years old. It was like 10 years, but
it was before Me Too.
Yeah, and a lot of stuff as well has changed, I think, in fandom culture, where it used to be very much, hey, you can write whatever you want, there are no consequences, and now we're a lot more considerate about like labels and trigger warnings, and generally trying to write the world that we want to see, and not necessarily dark, terrible worlds, because there's enough of that in queer fiction, unfortunately. So yeah, there's it was a classic one for me, and I was really excited to see how, if it would even still work, really, as a more woke kind of time that we're in now. But it's so cleverly done, and it's so, like, you don't at any point feel icky about it. You're not like, is this power dynamic okay? It's just everything's explained, and you get into both characters' heads, and you know that everyone is on the same page, and they're doing things that they want to do. So that makes it just a really cool read as well.
I think for me, the thing that I liked was that anytime I would start to question the power dynamic, the book would just directly interrogate it itself. Like,
yes,
that she took that head on, which I think was really responsible, because it is a boss-employee relationship. There's a significant age gap. There's a significant class gap and financial situation gap between them. And rather than just glossing it over, which often happens in rich girl, poor girl, age gap, boss employee books, it's kind of one of those like, oh, this is a thing, but we're not going to pay attention to that because we're attracted to each other and sexy and whatever, blah, blah. The book doesn't ever do that. Like, I love that it directly takes all of those things head on and looks at them and then makes it okay.
I think most importantly for me is they discuss it with each other.
Yes.
Like, I think that's something about, I've seen like such an improvement on that, on like storytelling across the board, but there's consent in terms of like, you know, your own individual thought process, but there's also like making sure the other person is aware of what you're thinking and feeling. And it's just every time you think, oh no, they're gonna like blow this with some miscommunication, or they're gonna make this like too difficult, you know, it goes to show that you can have like serious adult conversations and still maintain tension and conflict. That can all still be there. Like, you're not ruining the story. And I think it's anyone who's like, wow, I don't know how to do like conflicts, or I find it really hard to make my characters disagree with each other but still end up in a good place. I think it's probably like quite a good lesson for a lot of writers in how to walk that line, because it is a very tricky line to walk. I'm really impressed by how it came out. I'm just like, oh god, that's how you do it. And I do that with a lot of writers. I do it with Jay so often. I'll be like, I'm reading one of her books and I'm like 3/4 of the way through it and I think, wait a minute, like I'm already waiting for them to get like married and move in together. How did you do this to me? Like, they didn't like each other at the start of this book, and it's like seamless. You don't even notice it. It's being done in your head as you're processing the book. It's so nice to see when that's done well, and it's effortless. You as the reader are not doing all the work.
No.
You're just enjoying the ride, you know.
Yeah.
Good times all round.
Very good. So you've been kind of in the LesFic community for the last couple of years. Is there anything about where we're headed as a community of readers and writers that has you particularly excited?
I think multimedia is the biggest deal. Books are great. I love books, and I live and die by books. I absolutely do. But I think to have that wider impact and to get like people who are maybe not fully within the community, getting them to come and see what we're up to and like to see the best of what we're doing. I think branching out into audio has been fantastic. It's like, it's the next best thing to seeing it acted out. It's like hearing your characters talk to you. And for once, it's not in the like, you know, way. It's in the professional way. So dipping into audio for me has been like a roller coaster thing of just so exciting. I've seen there's some other cool stuff coming up with maybe like interactive games and multimedia stuff. And it's just, there's so many ways to tell a story. Partly, I mean, even little things at the moment, like the music in the mirror has, you know, nothing may ever come of it, but it's been shopped around at the moment for being turned into hopefully a TV series. And as my other day job, or hopefully day job to be, is to be a television writer, those two things, if they could dovetail, wouldn't it be nice if the people who are writing the fix-its for where TV has let us down or where cinema has let us down, if those people ended up telling the stories that end up on the TV screens or on the cinema screen? I mean, that would just be the happy ending of like LesFic, I guess. But it wouldn't end anything. It would just keep growing. But yeah, I just think the more we can branch out and the more people who can hear, see, understand the stories, then, you know, the better for everyone. That's my big, where else can we get into? Where can we talk to people and tell them these stories?
I love it. Where can people find you online if they want to connect with you?
Well, mostly I'm shouting at people on Twitter. That seems to be like 10% of my day right now. So yeah, I'm Lola Keeley _ on Twitter. So that's my main social place to come and chat. I am on Facebook. I've got a cool little page there, which is full of fun people who just pop up with like awesome comments, and I'm like, how did you know that? And the other one, I do have a website as well, which is in the middle of being revamped. So hopefully by the time this comes out, I will have a very shiny new website. Which never trust your web designer to get things done on time when you're your own web designer. It turns out. So yeah, you always leave your own work to last. So I will be out there at lolakeeley.co.uk to show off my Britishness, and also because .com wasn't available. So, other than that, it's all good.
Mm-hmm.
But that is where I am in the ether at the moment.
That is all for this episode. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me. It's been great.
I'm Tara, and you've been listening to Let's Do Books. You can email me at tara@thelesbianreview.com with your questions or comments. If you're an author who's interested in joining me on the show to talk about the LesFic you love or the trends that have you interested, please let me know. If you've enjoyed this episode, please check out the show notes where you'll find a Patreon link for Tilt, or visit patreon.com/thelesbiantalkshow. Our patrons get exclusive content like bonus podcasts that no one else gets access to. To find this and many other great shows, all you need to do is search for Tilt, spelled TLT, on iTunes, Podbean, Stitcher, or Spotify.